Welcome. Greetings to all, and welcome to the Edina Parents for Progress 2021 Edina School Board Candidate Forum. My name is Margaret Davis, and I will be your host and moderator this evening. I want to share a little about myself. As a mother of 3 school-aged children and a resident of the City of Edina, I am very concerned about the Edina school system. As a professional with a PhD in public health, I also hold an educated understanding of the COVID-19 issues at our schools. I am pleased that this forum is happening this evening and hope that the unanswered questions that both I and all of you have will get answered. If you care about education of our students in the Edina School District, if you care about property taxes, tax increment financing, or property values, if you care about the mental health welfare of our children, if you care about the decline of grade level performance, the rise in Edina residents choosing other school options, or any of the other large issues faced by the Edina School District, you should stay and watch, or come down to Edina City Hall and join in person. I wish to thank the City of Edina for providing this great venue, and a special thank you to the City of Edina Communications Department, Edina TV, and Mr. Denfeld and his staff for the event production, live streaming, and video. It is just amazing the support we've received. This event is being live streamed on the City of Edina Facebook page and the City of Edina YouTube channel. Additionally, tonight's forum will be available for playback on the Edina City YouTube channel and the Edina Parents for Progress website. Now, on to the reason you are all here. Tonight's forum will be unlike any school board candidate forum that we have seen in the City of Edina. The forum is an event of the Edina Parents for Progress, and it is a platform idea which Liz Ross conceived and she and Jeff Northrup brought to life. Edina Parents for Progress was created and operated by Edina community volunteers. We are dedicated to providing facts along with an open and safe discussion platform to the Edina community. Edina Parents for Progress is nonpartisan, does not support or oppose any candidate for office or political party. Edina Parents for Progress is not controlled or funded by the Edina School Board, the Edina School Administration, or Educate Minnesota Edina. We are totally independent. We also wish to share our excitement at the appointment of the new Edina School Superintendent, Dr. Stanley, and we wish her well. We hope the school board will not shackle her with decisions made in the past and allow her the independence to make decisions and move our district forward. Lastly, we wish to thank our teachers, bus drivers, food service workers, and building staff, all who love and work with our children, despite the unrest in the district. They are incredible, and we are thankful for them. Okay, so we're going to start by setting the stage. In a recent Edina School Board candidate forum, I'm moving on to questions before I'm talking about our candidates here. So we have 2 of the 6 candidates here. We have Nicole Schnell and we have Owen Michaelson. All 6 were invited. These 2 were happy, were willing to come and join us today, and we're looking forward to their answers to a really nice set of questions we have here. So I just thought for a second we could let you guys each introduce yourself and just say, you know, how this campaign has gone for you, and how about give us your favorite flavor of ice cream or dessert if you don't like it.
I'll start with the difficult one. My favorite flavor is chocolate. My name is Nicole Schnell, and I would say that I have learned every single minute of this campaign, and it's brought out some really, really good people in our community, including you. So thank you so much for being here. It's great to see everyone tonight. Thanks for having us.
Thanks.
Well, of course, I'm Owen Michaelson, and I am a 4-year member of the school board, and my wife and I have lived here in Edina for 22 years. We have 4 children, 3 of whom have graduated from Edina High School, and 1 who remains. And we moved to Edina because we were inspired by its commitment to excellence, and that is my drive, to have the school district return to the excellence that it was well known for. And it's a delight to campaign and to meet so many people. And I think campaigns are really good for public deliberation, to have you all, have the whole community think about what our priorities are. It's not just an election. It's also to think through issues across our society. So, and then one of those pressing societal issues is what flavor of ice cream. And I think it's Sebastian Joe's. My favorite is some sort of chocolate raspberry combination. I forget what they call it. Some people have probably had that before.
I think that's raspberry chocolate chip.
Yeah, that's it.
One?
Yeah, they come in
Really
chips.
nice ice cream.
Yes.
Really nice. For sure. Well, thank you so much, and thanks for coming out and joining us. So I want to get back to starting with these questions that I tried to do prematurely. And I've got a few things to say first, and then we're going to move on to a short video, and then we'll move on to the question part of it. In a recent Edina School Board Candidate Forum, our mayor, Mr. James Hovland, shared some thoughts. We believe them to be relevant and important. We will now share the video and be back to discuss.
Like 75% of the parents in the United States. Well, when I talk to mayors in the West Suburban area, there's this general discontent amongst when I talk to mayors in the West Suburban area, there's this general discontent amongst population, and I know that at the U.S. Conference of Mayors, we had a pollster there do some work, and 75% during the heart of the pandemic, 75% of the parents in the United States that were surveyed would move their child to a different district if they had the opportunity. So there was a lot of unrest about how kids were being educated.
Longer. He talks pretty in depth, but you can find this and other videos on the Edina Parents for Progress website. Mayor Hovland discusses, as he goes on in this video, that at the height of the pandemic, about 75% of the families of students around the country and here in Edina wanted to move their students, demonstrating the level of unmet needs at our schools. He went on to discuss the status that Edina holds as a city that many wish to live in. He uses a three-legged stool to point out the three reasons that make Edina attractive. The first leg of the stool is our unique location. The second is our quality and established business community. And number three, the third leg, is our world-class public school system. Sitting on top of this stool, this three-legged stool, is property values. And if one leg falters, the stool will fall. We all agree on the importance of our school system, yet U.S. News and World Report has estimated that approximately 40% of Edina high school graduates that walk and accept diplomas are not prepared to do so. Our own school board is in possession of reporting that shows almost 40% of current fifth graders are 1 to 2 years behind grade level. Approximately 1 in 3 third graders is below grade level, and somewhere between 22 and 26% of Edina families with students now send their children to non-Edina schools, I think that means to private schools. The big question tonight is the third leg wobbling, or has it been broken? We will get into specifics as we move through the evening, but what is your big picture assessment of where we are today, and what are your priorities to accomplish in your first year? And I think what we'll do is just switch back and forth who goes first. So do you want to start with Owen Michaelson?
Sure. I think that Mayor Hovland made that statement at the Chinese Candidate Forum. He made something very similar to that then. And it lands on a couple of major issues surrounding our district, one of which is the discontent. First off, there is a lot of discontent, and I'm not surprised at that figure. There's a difference between discontent and action. And people say that they would like to leave, that's 75%, but when you actually get down to hard numbers, it's now 22%. And I think we are one of the higher districts in terms of percentage of resident students who actually leave. And so people who act on that discontent, we're pretty high on that. And it's been growing. One thing that I find disturbing is that the most recent enrollment report had 19% of our kindergartners not enrolling in Edina Public Schools. By the time they get to high school, to their senior year, it's 26%. So the number climbs. And so that's a disturbing fact. The other thing that, and I'll get back to the central question, is this large-scale discontent also speaks to the challenge of public education as a whole. That if you have that many people discontent with their local schools, what does that say about public education? And the past year saw national problems with teachers' unions. Chicago had the mayor actually fighting with the union. So how durable is this model of public education if we're getting that kind of discontent? That's a whole discussion in its own right. And that's part of the reason I'm concerned and why I ran 4 years ago, is because, yes, indeed, our school district, I believe, has been in decline. And this decline needs to be arrested. I can go into, maybe perhaps later on, we're going to get into questions about why, but I don't know if it's broken. If it's gone, I forget how you actually phrased that, Margaret, but it's damaged, yes, and it's wobbling. We used to be pretty much the consensus perennial top school district in the state. In the last U.S. News & World Report rankings, the high school was at 9th. It's bounced around to 11th and 10th. It seems to be settling in around there. That's not what a lot of people moved into Edina for, and that's not that is sustaining the property values. So, indeed, we have an issue there, and I'm sure we're going to get more into that later on.
Thank you.
So I'm a classic middle child. I don't like conflict, and so when Mayor Hovland said that, I wanted us to be the 25% that didn't want to move our kids, and had I not experienced last year in Edina Public Schools, I probably would have said, well, surely at least 20% of the people that don't want to leave their city live in Edina. I'm here and I'm running because I did want to leave, and I'm concerned about that. This is my hometown. This is where I grew up. My husband and I came back here to raise our kids, and what we have experienced, particularly in the upper levels of junior high and high school, is not meeting standards. And it's not meeting standards across the board. You can say U.S. News Report and they changed their formula, so we're coming down a little bit different on that. Or you can look at MCAs, but whatever metric, and trust me, I love this city, so I looked. Whatever metric you see, whether you compare Edina to Edina 2010 to 2019, whether you compare Edina to Minnetonka, whether you compare MCAs, or however you compare your assessment, there's a story being told there. And try as you might, if you don't look at it, I'm really worried that that third leg is going to be broken. So I definitely think it's in need of reinforcement, and I am just willing to put my name in the ring and do the best and bring the tool set that I have to kind of help shape that.
Thank you. Now we are going to move on to discuss. I have some questions about education specifically. What is the primary role of the Edina schools? And let's start with you, Nicole.
Feels like a trick question to educate children for $100. Yeah.
Thank you. Owen?
What is the primary role? It's to educate our children. Absolutely.
The next question, as discussed earlier, 3 in 10 Edina public school third graders cannot read at Minnesota state standard level proficiency. 40% of fifth graders, 1 to 2 years behind, and 40% of graduates are unprepared. What actions do you believe need to happen short and long term to fix this? Owen?
This is one of my central concerns. I have been championing this ever since I've been on the board. Literacy is one of, I think the third grade literacy is the single most important metric in the entire school district. And the reason for this is because up until third grade, kids are learning to read. At that point, there's a crossover. They're now reading to learn. And if they don't make that crossover, they're going to be stumbling and staggering for the rest of their academic career. And what can also happen is that this then can lead to adulthood problems, chemical dependency, criminal justice issues, employment concerns. Our modern society needs people to be able to read. I own this issue because my wife and I discovered that our 2 younger children are dyslexic. And she's an educator herself and said, you know, I think you're dyslexic. That went over really well with me. Took me about 1.5 years to accept it, but I think she's right. And I had a lot of struggles myself in elementary school. My brother had a lot of problems. And so I own this issue. And I know that this can cause problems for people. And so when I saw how high our literacy, how low our proficiency rate was in some kids, I thought this is unacceptable. And so I have raised it repeatedly. I call what we need to do is a war effort. And I suppose I can take some credit for this now emerging as one of the top considerations of our district in our strategic plan. We have a solid, comprehensive literacy plan in place, and we need to monitor it very closely. We need to hold administration accountable for making sure that these results come in, that we start moving the needle. We had a bad year in particular last year. I think you said, Margaret, 30% of our third graders are not reading at the grade level. It's been like 25%, but last year took a big hit too. And what I have thought about this, and that is that it's actually bigger than the school district itself. I think that this will entail some community effort. And there's a good group called Edina Dyslexic Parent Alliance, and they've been working on this issue. There have been some community members. I see one in the back clapping as I'm saying this. I have known of people who have been a part of something called the borrow tutoring system, which mentors children and meets with them every week to help them with reading. I don't have the answers, but I think as a society, we owe this to our children to somehow get this figured out because it's so critical. There are some states in the South that forecast their prison bed populations off that third grade literacy rate. It's that significant. So, yes, it's a significant issue, and I hope that we can address it and get that reading rate down to about the proficiency at 95% and the non-proficient at about 5%. I think that's realistic.
Thank you. Nicole?
This, too, I went searching for it, and nationally I do know it to be a problem. But what I'm concerned about is the dismissiveness of some of the board in discussions about how big of a issue it was. So I'm happy to follow Owen, who has years of research onto the reading side, but I'm going to take a different approach to answering it, and that is, what are we tasking our teachers with? When I talk to the teachers in third grade, when I talk to the elementary school teachers, when I talk to teachers in the high school level, it's the variation of learners that they're having in their classroom, and even if classroom sizes hasn't changed, the variation of learners has. And I think that's a problem, and I wonder what we're doing as a school board and as administration for our teachers to really help them focus and drive in on what we think are priorities. For example, my children have been in Edina Public Schools for 12 years now, 13 years, one just graduated. Nearly every year we've changed up the technology and the learning platforms and the strategies. And I don't know about you, but I can't even remember my password half the days to get into my computer program. So when you change systems on people, even in the interest of efficiency, it takes away from something else. And so that is my question that I'd like to bring to the board continuously. Now that we know literacy is a problem, what are we doing about it, and how are we going to move towards it to really prioritize that so that our teachers can they're the experts in this, not the marketing person. They're the experts in the learning. And so I really would like to involve them and keep them kind of centered and focused on helping us with this. Additionally, I know we're doing the LETTERS curriculum, which is a curriculum that goes on top of our existing educational curriculum for reading, and so I'm aware of that, and I'm aware of some of the things, but we truthfully have not invested the way other school districts have in training people in that. So I'm going to ask the questions and figure out why we haven't and what we can do, but we're going to need our teachers all hands on deck because it is a real problem.
Thank you. The next question is, the current strategic plan outlines a plan for literacy. In a recent board meeting, the board uniformly expressed that they are worried about the plan, citing the funds needed, the teacher time needed for training, and the unresolved issue of balanced versus structured literacy. In your opinion, is the literacy plan as currently outlined funded and workable? Are we behind the rest of the country in our assessment of balanced versus structured literacy? So, Nicole, are you okay going first?
Sure.
She just talked.
We, I think, are on par, which hurts me to say kind of in terms of literacy, and I think we rest on that, and I don't think we should, because if you're going to be excellent in education, you need to be a leader, and you need to be investing in it. I would stand by my statement that I said earlier that do we have the right level of investment? I'm not sure from a funding perspective what the teachers have said. I haven't had the opportunity to ask or to sit in any of those roundtables with teachers. But let me tell you this. I think from a capital of what we're spending our time on, we do not have the focus that we need for our teachers to be able to strategically approach this.
Thank you. Owen?
My approach to this was that there are competing models of how to do literacy. There's whole language, there's balanced, and then there's structured literacy, scientifically based literacy. And I would prefer, as many in the dyslexic community in Edina would prefer, the scientifically based structured literacy, which deals with phonics and phonemic awareness and comprehension, vocabulary, works off of those. And I wish we would do that. The plan is more based in balanced literacy. And so it's not my favorite in that regard. However, I give the administration room to move on this. The person who largely came up with it, Bonnie, I'm forgetting Bonnie's last name right now, did about 90% of it. And I believed in her ability to execute. And so to the person, I had faith in the person. She's gone now, and so I'm hoping that her vision can be executed on. I have, the analogy I used in meetings was the British war effort in World War I. They were being bombed by the Germans, and they had to get something, they had to build up their planes. And Churchill appointed Lord Beaverbrook to mount the industrial response, and he rose to the challenge. But the idea was, if he couldn't do it, if he wasn't making progress within 4 months, you're finding somebody else. That's not working, get somebody else. Get it to work, one way or another. I'm not absolutely committed to one method or another, just make it work. And so that's what I'm saying. Let's look at the numbers. Let's see if we're actually moving the needle. Let's see if the teachers are understanding more and more the new pedagogy. There's the letters curriculum. I think maybe Nicole had mentioned that. It's a program, I think 30 teachers are signing up for it right now and working on it. And so the teachers are fantastic. They care about our kids. I want to empower them as best we possibly can to execute on that model. That's why I'm very concerned about why we have so much politicized professional development. Last year, I haven't seen what the figures are now, but we had I don't know what it was, but it was a long commitment to some equity training. And is that really productive in terms of getting the teachers to learn how to actually administer and execute on curriculum? I don't think so. And so I'm a critic of that. I would like to eliminate or bring it down to bare bones so that the teachers are learning how to actually teach in the classroom, how to execute on the models, how to learn more content, focus more on content and less on process. That's another element of that.
Thank you. All board members and candidates have discussed the Edina Family Center and how sad they are to see only a very small number of families utilizing this opportunity. What happened? How has this been overlooked? And what do you intend to do to resurrect it? Can you go, Owen, first?
Do you know the context behind that question? What's not being used?
So it's the Edina Family Center.
As an ECFE?
Yeah, it's that group, the people who do a lot of the community ed for or I don't know if that's officially what it's called, but for the youngest group.
Yeah, I love ECFE, early family childhood education. I was in the dad's class for 6 years, and took my sons and my daughter over. It was so much fun, and we dads ended up talking about the wives for about a third of the time. It's kind of turned out to be therapy, and but it was just great. It was fantastic, and we were a leader in this. And when we moved down 22 years ago, my wife assigned me to sign up my daughter, who is less than 1. And I had to wait for an hour on the third floor of the EC, maybe 2 hours. Some of you who have been here that long know how big, I'm seeing heads nodding. It was a huge deal just to get signed up for it. We had that kind of draw. And it drew people to the district. And in terms of equipping families to be parents, it's really hard to beat. And since let's use the most charitable sense of the word equity, it's very equitable. And so it's wonderful. I am a little concerned with the shuffling of the deck that happened last year. And I don't believe as the board members, we had a lot of visibility into that. And a number of folks were basically terminated, and new staff were brought on board. And so I studied. I just didn't comprehend what happened there. So I don't know. I guess my answer is I'd like more transparency and visibility into that, because it has been a wonderful program. And if that's what the question's driving at, yes, I have a concern about that.
Thank you. Nicole?
And I, too, was a recipient and lucky participant in ECFE and met a lot of people there. And so I would echo everything that Owen said, even down to the therapy for the moms in the room. So, but my thinking on this is I'm curious, because we are seeing explosive growth in pre-K outside of the public schools. We're seeing Kinderberry, you're seeing OLG right here. We're seeing a lot of growth. And so I guess what I need to do in order to address that is to become a student of where that growth is coming from and how did ECFE not match up to it. I'm aware of the staffing challenges, but I think we started to see a decline in our census even prior to the staffing challenge. So I'd like to really dig in and get to know it. My kids are 16, 17, and 18, so it's been a couple years since I've been in the mom's class.
Thank you. The Gifted and Talented program at the school has been dismantled over the last few years. Why, and do you believe that this is good or bad? Nicole?
I love that you ask me why. I don't know. I keep asking the questions. I'm trying to figure that out. I know it has to do with Policy 601. I believe that it has to do with trying to make it talent and more equitable. But let me just tell you the other side of it, is that I think students rise to the occasion that we set them up for. And I do believe in every single student in this community. And I think they should have the option to be a part of the type of learning they want to. When you look at the migration of where people are going out to, it's not all private schools. In fact, a lot of people are going to public schools. And when I look at the public schools that they're going to or the charter schools that they're going to, they offer choice. And I know there's a fine line there because you can't be everything to everyone, but I do believe there's other schools that are able to deliver on this idea of choice. So when it comes to curriculum, when it comes to, talent and gifted program, whatever you want to call it today, I do think we need to offer choice. I think parents want to be engaged in it. I think we want to be a part of our students' education.
Thank you. Owen?
This is at the heart of one of the reasons why I ran, is I want the schools to be able to teach our kids where they're at, whether they're struggling readers or whether they're precocious and capable of taking on real rigor. And I would like to see differentiated classes based off of ability. And I'd also like to provide for robust on and off ramps. And if kids are struggling with dyslexia, and they should be at that point perhaps in the lowest reading group. But once they master reading, and if they're actually then capable of getting into accelerated reading, well, let's put them in. Let's not set up this kind of system that locks kids in early on. I don't want anything like that at all. Lots of on-ramps, lots of off-ramps. We have weakened our commitment to gifted and talented, and a lot of that stems from the previous strategic plan, which had language in it such that if there were racially or economically identifiable characteristics in classes, that should not be, and that there were, in fact, some racial, socioeconomic characteristics that were found in some of the gifted and talented classes. I don't think that's a sign, say, of racism. I think it's just a sign that some kids are doing pretty well. And so what happened because of that is in some of the elementaries, some of the gifted and talented levels were collapsed. The COGAT test, if you've heard of that, was eliminated. That's one of the best indicators for gifted and talented services. I would like to reinstate that. I would like to return to complete, robust, gifted and talented. Not just have it as something we have to do, but something we celebrate. One of the greatest disappointments I have in my 4 years of being on the board is that I was part of the 601 initiative, which we were able to pass 2 years ago, I think this month, and then 2 months later it was rescinded. And this was to do basically two things, one of which was to put in backstops so that the existing gifted and talented programs could not erode further, and that we would then put in a couple of additional gifted and talented classes. So we got it going, but then it fell back. So I would like to reinstate that, if possible. The other thing is I want to really call out the value of gifted and talented programs, because it's not as if it's just in the service of kids. It's in the service of society. The Economist magazine about 3 years ago had a significant issue about gifted and talented services, and they used the percentage of kids in gifted and talented and compared that to the level of patents issued in that country. And they use that as a proxy for the success of the GT programs. And they found that the more robust the GT programs were, the more patents were issued in the countries around the world. And then these patents are tied in with GDP growth and so forth. So I don't want to create any sense of resentment against the gifted and talented kids that they may be advanced. They're helping us all. Many of them turn out to invent things that make our lives easier, make our lives safer, make our lives happier, and employ us. So it's in our best interest to embrace this, not just tolerate GT, but embrace it.
Thank you. So now that's the end of our formally written questions on education, but we'd like to give the audience a chance now to go up to one of the podiums and ask any questions you might have, or if you want to ask any further on what the two candidates have discussed. Feel free to go up if you... Okay. So keep thinking, too, about possible... Okay, go ahead.
Do we need to say our name? David Frankel, I live in Edina. Just to be transparent, none of my children are in Edina school systems anymore. I emailed this question to the email address for that purpose, but I'm curious, Minnesota Department of Health, or excuse me, Department of Education, publishes graduation statistics on all the school systems. And Edina High School, just 5 years ago, had a graduation rate of 97%. And as of last year, which is the last year reported, went down to 94%. You know, keep in mind, Minneapolis Public Schools graduation rate's 86%. At what point is Edina going to match Minneapolis? And you know, the graduation rates declining are never talked about. That's one thing I found. I moved to Edina about 11 years ago. That is not discussed. And in my professional environment, the only way to improve is to talk about the things that need improvement. And I don't see that happening very much in the Edina Public Schools. In a point of reference, I moved here from Virginia. My kids went to the Fairfax County schools, which are considered some of the best school districts in the country. And the big reason for that, which Edina can't compete with, is it has a lot of U.S. government employees. You know, my science committee was mainly people who work for the CIA. So we have a lot of top level, especially you could appreciate PhDs in that community. But back to talking about data, Fairfax County Schools, through this whole U.S. News and World Report redo, still has about a half dozen schools rated higher than Edina High School. That didn't change through all these various statistical changes, and in fact, arguably has a #1 school on that list in its district. So you can see, you know, what Fairfax has, and also when the Edina Public Schools years ago went through basically reprogramming their goals for the school system, traveled around the country to all kinds of small school districts, which I could never figure out, including Manhattan Beach Public School. And I actually lived in Redondo Beach right next door for quite a while. And those beach towns are mainly known for their early morning surfing classes. So I'm not sure what that was all about. But in any case, you know, Fairfax County should have been used as a point of reference for a comparable school district that was well known. And I even talked to people who worked for the Edina school system at the time, and they recognized Fairfax County schools, but they didn't want to do it. So I don't understand that at all. But anyway, thank you.
Did you want to ask the candidates anything specific about like what they thought about
Well, I think Owen, since he's been on the board, I mean, they've talked about the decline in the graduation rates.
Sure, I'll take it. Well, the first thing, Dave, I want to tell you, you didn't have to apologize for not having a kid in the district, because you're a taxpayer, and as a citizen, you have a commitment to how we educate the kids. And so that's something I'm trying to get around, because people say, if you don't have a kid in the district, you don't have a voice. Oh, is that so? Tax amnesty day for you then, Dave. No, we're asking you to pay taxes because we want you to be committed to our kids and to our society. So thank you for saying that, because it gave me a soapbox and a platform for saying that. Thomas Jefferson High School is, I think, the top-ranked school, and it's in Fairfax County, and which also makes me think about the U.S. News and World Report rankings. Yes, conspicuously, we have been gliding down in Edina statewide, but nationally, we also have too, because we are always in the top 100 schools in the country. The last report, I think we were in the 600s. So Minnesota, relative to the nation, is actually going down too. So not good signs. Now, there's an obscure fact about graduation rates, which is that kids have until 5 years after graduation, I think it's that long, to actually graduate. So they didn't graduate. And so those figures alter a little bit. So that's 94%. I don't know where that is. It might just be right now. But in general, though, I share your concern because some of those metrics, we've been seeing an erosion in them. And indeed, that's why I ran, because I want to shore up our academic rigor and keep our focus on education.
Well, the demographics should at least show why they're not graduating. I realize possibly to correct that might take a little more work, but that's the other thing that, we live in a data world, the information highway, whatever you want to call it. And again, I don't see that, you mentioned the mayor's presentation. The U.S. League of Cities is overly encouraging cities to use data and evidence in decision making. And that should also be any government agency, including the school board. When decisions are made, even the mayor stated 75% want to move their children. I do a lot of academic work. And to see people quote numbers, where did it come from? And the city does that a lot. Quotes numbers, no idea. There's no citations. Well, I can make up numbers. I'm the smartest guy in the world. But, I wish I was. But, you have to use data in decision making. I mentioned the data from the Minnesota Department of Education. It may not be right, but it's the only thing I have. And to be honest, I was in a presentation just yesterday of U.S. government. You got to use data, but sometimes the data is wrong.
Right.
And so you always have to, you probably appreciate that. You have to realize, garbage in, garbage out, but you have to hope your data is right. But that's not what I'm getting from the Edina public school system. But, unfortunately, I moved to Edina because of the public schools, like a lot of people. 2 of my 3 children didn't graduate from Edina High School. I had no intention of sending them to private schools. My father was a university professor. His whole career he went to public schools, and he taught in the public school. I had no intention of going my kids to a private school, but also, because one of my children went to Blake, they let me know the largest group of children at Blake are from Edina.
Yeah.
And they got people busting down their doors trying to get in there. So,
Right.
from Edina.
We should move on with.
Yes,
Okay, sorry.
thanks. Nicole, did you want to make a comment or anything? You don't have to. I just wanted to give you a moment to talk if you wanted.
Oh, I'm good. I love data. It's on my website, so check it out. It's the data that you're looking at too, though. That's all I have access to.
Yes. Okay, there's one other question about education that I missed here. This is the last one, and then we'll move on. And we are going to limit our, just so we can get through our questions, we're going to try to limit our answers to a minute and a half. Is that right? Yeah, we're going with a minute and a half from now on, if that works for you guys. Okay, so this last one is critical race theory, culturally responsive teaching, social and emotional teaching. All these phrases, what does each mean to you? How does our district define them? And how are they actually used in our schools? Minute and a half. Nicole, do you want to start?
And that's what I think. I have asked these questions, and I am just asking the questions to the superintendent and to our teachers, because I'm in what I would call the discovery phase of this. I've been told we are not teaching critical race theory. I've been told we are employing social and emotional learning strategies. And I guess for me, what it means is, again, I really want to know the focus of what we're doing here. And it seems like everyone has a little bit of a pet project, and it seems like we're asking a whole heck of a lot of our teachers in the classroom. My background, Dave, is in data, and so I have some concerns about the social and emotional learning and the data mining that's going on with some of the, you may or may not know this, but basically Panoramic was commissioned for $38,000 to kind of help us assess our children's social and emotional learning. But my concerns on that is when you keep data on kids and you analyze it and it goes outside the doors, I have concerns about that. So to answer the question specifically, I'm concerned about how we're approaching these. I'm concerned about the lack of depth of questions about when we're saying yes and approving certain strategies and certain policies. But I've been told by the district superintendent that we are not teaching critical race theory, so I believe that to be an individual personnel issue.
Thank you. Owen?
To me, it's a very slippery term because critical race theory has actually been explicitly taught here in Edina. All you got to do is go to my website and you'll see the documentation on this. The Minnesota Teacher of the Year 2012, I won't say her name, wrote an essay that was published in More Courageous Conversations in 2012, 5-page essay in which he uses the term critical race theory 5 times and uses that word to describe what she was designing into sophomore English. Period. She says this. Minnesota Teacher of the Year. She was given the award largely because of creating that pre-AP 10 class. So we cannot say that we don't teach critical race theory. Prove it to yourself. Go to my website. You'll see it. It's her own words. And she was celebrated for this. And the term critical race theory was used largely interchangeably with the concept of equity. So this word equity is very slippery because many of us have, at first blush, a sense of a positive orientation toward it. But, I'm being waved down. Okay, so I guess can I finish with this? I don't like its effect because I don't like how it's tribalizing us, and I don't like how it's getting us to think first about our race and not about our humanity.
Thank you. So now we're going to turn on to some questions about the Edina School Board and about can they hear the voice of parents. So the first question here says, the Edina Parents for Progress group was formed from the frustration of parents who felt unheard by the Edina School Board. Just this year, over 1,000 signed a petition, which was given to the school board, and no immediate action was taken. Should the Edina School District be listening more or less to parents and the community? Should we go ahead with that question, or do you want to go with the video first? Okay.
Hello. My name is this working?
Yep.
Oh, okay.
Welcome. You're good.
It doesn't sound. My name is Erica Allenberg, and I have a senior and third grader in the district and a 6th grader that is at a private school. And I'm here to talk about 2 things, and I'll try to make it fast. But the first thing I wanted to ask is what the district policy is when dealing with authorities seeking immigration status of students and parents with recent events in our nation. I wanted to know if the district does have a policy regarding that, and if they don't, Minneapolis School District just came out with, the school board just passed a resolution that when working with authorities, they would not reveal the immigration status of students or parents to authorities if they did come to the district for that information. I don't know if that is something that is even held in our district, that information. But I think it's something important that our board looks into. I don't want to lose, especially since we're neighboring the district, I don't want to lose any good students for fear over their status as an immigrant. I was also wondering if the board and or administration was going to reinforce our commitment to keeping refugees and immigrants safe in our district. I think it's very important I don't think we can reinforce that enough times, especially given the not minority status, but minority status as a statistic within our district. I think that is very important, and I would just like us to be more proactive about that as opposed to reactive. I think that we as a district tend to be reactive and wait for things to happen, and I think we've done a fairly good job of reacting to things and saying the appropriate things. I think Dr. Dressen did a very good job of sending out communication when the stuff was going on at the high school. I just think we could be very proactive and set a good example, not only for our community, but there have been countless other communities that have said things, and it would be great if it was an example on Twitter. Look what the Edina School District said. Look at the role model that they are setting, as opposed to, hey, look at this, maybe we should do something. So I just wanted to ask about that. The second thing, and I'm probably running out of time, but I want to echo what the other Erica said. I want to thank all of the board members. I know this is a thankless job, especially right now. But I think we need to acknowledge the fact that all of this, the root cause of this, is a complete lack of transparency from our administration. And everyone in the administration is going to be like, what? We communicate all the time. We set up these things to get feedback from parents, and only 10% participate. It's not our fault. I know all the talking points. The fact is, there is a complete lack of good data from the administration. There's a complete lack of real analytics. There's a complete lack of good research. There's a complete lack of correct interpretation of research. And the fact that the board does not hold the administration accountable for better data is so infuriating. I mean, to make decisions without better data, I just, as a person that is trained in process improvement, to see you guys make a decision without asking questions about some of this data is very frustrating. I think we've just gotten to a point where there's some sort of bizarre dysfunctional relationship where, and I know you guys are doing, honestly, I know you guys are doing the best you can. You're trying to make decisions. I know everyone's doing the best they can. I have to tell you, the level of frustration from the parents is palpable. And I have a senior. I've spent 13 years working my behind off for this district. Probably the last 3, I've given up trying to do anything. If more people like me give up on our district, you guys are out of luck, because it's because of our parents, it's because of our teachers that we're such a damn fine district.
Ms. Ellenberg, can you wrap up, please?
Oh, sure.
You're about 5 minutes right now.
I'm sorry. So I don't want you guys to think it's not, I appreciate what you do, but something needs to be figured out, how we can harness what you guys are doing, and what the parents are doing, and figure out a better process, because it ain't working right now. So that being said, I will close. Thank you for your time.
So I'm just going to follow up a little bit on what she said. So what are your thoughts on this? And have we made progress since 2017? And is the current board accountable to parents? Should we start with Owen? I think that's where we are.
Sure. So I've got 90 seconds, so I'm going to be a lot faster.
Yeah.
The first thing is there's a motion in place on the Edina School Board to limit community comment to 20 people, starting at 6 o'clock as opposed to 7 o'clock, and to not live stream it and not record it. I'm not in favor of that. I would like to keep doing what we have been doing, open community comment, starting at about 7 o'clock, 3-minute limit. We have no ceiling on it. I think we need to absolutely hear from all of you when you want to hear it, and sometimes it may be uncomfortable, and I think that's why we're in the hot seat. If there's concern about disruptive behavior, well, we can have the police come. But we have had nothing even close to that. So this motion is, I think, really unnecessary. I'd like to have all school board meetings themselves recorded. We have work sessions, which a lot of material is covered, and sometimes votes are taken in. And those, I think, I would like to record those, and I'd like to have those live streamed. Mm-hmm. So that's a very broad question. I'm probably running out of time, but one of my big things is I would like to have a lot of transparency. One of my issues is I would like to get our MAP scores published on the website and have it by cohort, by grade, and by school. Hopkins has been doing this for years. MAP scores are more authoritative than MCAs. Teachers internally like them better. I'd like to see that. So I'd like to also have MAP tests in the fall and spring. Okay, so I'll go on.
Thank you. Nicole?
So the question about communication is the heart of why I sit here today. And that is, I didn't know much about the school board, admittedly, even a year ago, and started getting involved because I saw some of our students suffering. And when I realized it wasn't just my students suffering with some of the consequences and unintended consequences, but still consequences of the decisions that were being made, I reached out to our school board because I value what our teachers do, I value our administrators, I recognize the difficult situation that we were all faced with. But as a parent, I felt helpless, and I reached out to the board not knowing any of them, and this gentleman to my right here, he actually responded back to me, which I was grateful for, and at least I knew he heard the message. But then I couldn't figure out how to get our words across and how that we could rally people behind, because we were all trying to figure out how to even get together and what was going on. So my thing on communication is we absolutely live in a 24/7 world of communication. We have new tools. Why are we not using them? I don't understand why, as a parent, you have to be available at 5:30 to understand or to give input into what's going on in the school.
Thank you. I think there might be a slide going up, or do we need that? Okay. So our current board chair is working to amend Section 206, limiting public comments at board meetings. I think Owen mentioned that. Will the changes limit public input? Should the school board be accountable to the public? Nicole?
Yes.
Yeah. Owen?
Well, I think I've already answered this, and so I'm going to use this moment to talk about another way to empower parents and activate their voice in the district. One of which is that I think collective organizing is useful. The teachers have that. It's called the teachers union. They get to collectively represent for the teachers. Who collectively represents for the parents and the students? None other than the school board. How can the school board be undivided in its loyalty when board members take union endorsements? To me, that creates a divided loyalty. I have called upon my fellow board candidates to forswear the union endorsement, and to date, only the two of us have done that. The rest of them have taken the endorsement. I think that's not a real good thing. The second thing is I would like to know more scientifically what you all are thinking. I would like to get very good surveys of parents, students, and teachers, and create baselines with it, and then monitor trends. I would like these surveys done regularly. I would like them done by an outside service, and I would like them to be scientifically based and to cover a gamut of questions. We are just kind of willy-nilly about what the sentiment of the community is. I would like to get much clearer data coming in regularly. So that's my second point.
Thank you. COVID-19 and its related protocols are impacting children and families. Why is there not even one parent on the Edina Schools COVID-19 command team? Owen, you want to start?
I never put that together. That's interesting. Well, I don't think that should be the case. And yes, indeed, I'd like to see more parental input on that. Haven't thought about that too much, so
Yeah.
a little bit flat-footed in that response.
Okay, Nicole, do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I believe Chair Allenberg is on the incident command team, or she was last fall when I reached out to her, so she would fit as a parent, but I would concur with that discussion. I just don't think we have diversity of thought on that.
Thank you. And then I think we're moving on to a video.
Thank you, Chair Ellenberg. I appreciate that. And thank you to everyone who came to speak this evening. It is good to be here with you this evening. And this is a really tough decision. I had shared during the webinar that we are going to do our very best to get this as right as we can, knowing that there is no perfect answer in the middle of this pandemic. But I am glad to be here this evening to be able to present to you a proposed plan that I The goal of this plan is to have our students in school 5 days a week in person and as consistently as possible. I have also moved to have this plan focus on phases. And so this phase would be phase 1. So it's just from the start of school, August 30th, to September 30th. I am proposing that we come back on September 13th at our board meeting, look at updated data points, look at vaccination rates, COVID infection rates, look at where we're at with if we had to experience quarantine in our schools. So the proposal that I have right now is that face masks would be required for early childhood through 8th grade students and staff. And at this point, the proposal that was put forward is to strongly recommend that 9th through 12th grade students and staff actually wear masks. We have a variety of mitigation efforts that are in place that were outlined in the report, and I am going to turn it over to Dr. Smazel and turn it back to.
So now I'm going to share a few COVID facts, and this comes from October 20th, so just it's fairly recent. And to start with, the Edina students that are fully vaccinated, in the grades 9 through 12, we have just over 77% of those students have reported to be vaccinated. And in grades 6 through 8, we're just over 50% reported vaccinated. The confirmed Edina Public Schools student COVID-19 cases, the new confirmed student cases this week, we have early learning and elementary school, we have 7. In middle and high school, we have 2. And just guessing from the numbers you see of vaccinations, I'm guessing those 2 are probably in the middle schools, and there might be actually 0 in the high school. The Edina Public Schools students in quarantine, that means the number of students in quarantine as a result of close contact in a school setting or school-sponsored activity. So in early learning and elementary schools, we right now have 47, and in middle and high school, we have 1. Number of students in quarantine due to close contact in non-school settings, we have early learning and elementary school students, we have 36 total. In middle and high school, we have 2. It's clear that numbers are very low in both the early learning elementary and in middle school, high school, with less than 1% affected. So this is about COVID-19, this question. Why did the board not accept Dr. Stanley's recommendation for masking? And should the elementary, middle, and high schools be treated differently for COVID protocols as she proposed? Should we start with, where are we now? Is it you?
I'm not sure why they didn't accept it. In fact, that was the day I decided to run. I think that's true, and statistically, you can look it up. But the board unanimously voted 7-0 to have Stacy Stanley be our new superintendent. And then when she brought forth the very first proposal, it's important for you to know this, it's the very first proposal she brought to the board. And I believe it was a 5-2 vote to go back to the kind of drawing board. So regardless of that, I just felt like that was not in good confidence, and it fit the CDC guidelines. So the CDC guidelines were recommended, wear a mask, whatnot. So I don't know why they voted that way. And then with the numbers as they are now, I feel like that's a trick question, and I feel like we should be moving much more, with much more agility. And I would just add that Minnetonka and Eden Prairie currently are employing Dr. Stanley's recommendation from day one.
Thank you. Owen?
Well, at that meeting, I think I expressed that I wanted optional masking from K up to 12, and Dr. Stanley's recommendation was to have optional masking K, or rather 9 through 12, and so that was better than nothing. And I was disappointed when the board decided to not even take that recommendation. So I have faith in Dr. Stanley, so I wish that we had at least accepted that. And we are, I think, overly stringent with our quarantining, and the kids are not getting we're taking kids out of school, and there are societies that are opening up. I think Norway is completely open up, and they're not having untoward consequences. Another thing that sort of gets under my skin a little bit with this is that I've got used to talking a lot, so okay, I guess I'm done.
Thank you. We'll move on to the next question here. What do you think about the administration notifying kids yesterday that the Sadie's dance was canceled? You want to start with Owen?
Sure. First off, it wasn't handled, it wasn't communicated very well, that the students heard about it before the parents did. And so that could have just been an oops, but on the other hand, we have too many oopses like that. And on the other hand, that plays right into the whole concern that parents kind of get in the way of the education of the kids. And so we're just sort of interlopers as the education establishment gets to our kids. No. The parents are first. We still have charge of them until they're, I forget what it is exactly. I think it's 18. So that ought to be honored. And so, accident or otherwise, it was an unfortunate communication. The other thing is, I think it's kind of a reaction to, apparently in the homecoming dance, the mosh pit had kids ripping off their masks, and the kids had a whole bunch of fun doing it, and I heard some stuff about it, so apparently it was a blast, but there was no big outbreak. And so it kind of proved the point, I'm being waved down again.
I just think we need more transparency on decisions like that. I think especially after this last year where our students really were taken out of a lot of social and emotional learning, and we as a district said that it was so hard that we invested a ton of money into that, and I'm happy to see that we did that. But then to go around and to kind of make a flip decision on this was confusing to me, and so I'd like to ask more questions about it and understand it.
Thank you. The next question is, what is your off-ramp for COVID restrictions, and when do you think they should end? Should we start with Nicole?
I think they should end when Margaret Davis tells us they could. I think it's pretty natural. I believe OLG came out with some communication today that sounded good to me, so I'll just throw that out because it's top of mind that once vaccines are available for younger kids, that they would be able to vaccinate or optional mask. I think having masks be mask optional right now for people who are vaccinated is very real and doable, and given our case rates and our county rates, remember we had those benchmarks a long time ago, and it seems like we no longer got those benchmarks. We made it and then we took them away. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of where I'm, again, confused. The other thing, I live with 2 teenagers. They're onto this. They know, they see me come in here, put a mask on, take my mask off, talk to you, and they're wondering why their teachers can't just do that, because it's really hard to learn French through 2 masks.
Thank you. Owen?
Well, if it were my druthers, I just said that I would prefer that we have masks be optional, K through 12, and there's been a series of private schools that did that completely last year. I don't see why we can't do it. There were not, again, untoward consequences with that. So I've been saying that being on a school board is it's like being in an arranged marriage. Because you didn't invite these people to the dance, they didn't invite you, but you got to coexist. And so I get along with people. They're my friends. I've been to their houses, and they know my kids, and vice versa. So, but it's what kind of decision? Where are they at? What's the off ramp that they'd feel comfortable with? And so we have to work as a team, and. So I hope the CDC comes out with something, because the CDC speaks to my fellow board members and gives us an off-ramp.
Thank you. Okay, disenrollment. The continued and steady number of Edina families leaving the district. There has been a lot of discussion on the Edina Parents for Progress Facebook page regarding exiting families and surveys. The district states they sent 528 existing families the survey, yet only 141 responded. We have parents who moved their children to other districts that have asked to provide feedback on why they did that, and they're not responded to. Please share your thoughts on why families are leaving, why they are not being heard, and what should be done to stop the flow out. Let's start with Owen.
This is one of my big issues. I think that we could do a better job of customer focus. And again, we've got a survey that was produced that I wish we had something more scientific, and I wish we were disciplined about making sure it went out. We talk about it, but my gut is we're only getting it out to maybe 20% of the departing parents. So we need to really keep on top of that. And this enrollment issue is spelling a lot of problems for us. I think it's kind of creating a spirit of desperation. And I think the Magnet School Initiative is a part of that to recoup the fleeing students. But I think we can do we're kind of rushing that whole process too. And I think if we returned our focus to core academics, we would retain our students. If we focused on bringing back GT, we did literacy right, we depoliticized the classrooms, and we had face-to-face. There's no threat of going away from that. I think we'd start drawing students back.
Thank you, Nicole.
I think it's really interesting to survey people and understand kind of why they're leaving. I think it's just as interesting to survey the people who are currently in the schools and know why they're staying. And I think that's something interesting that we haven't done that I've seen other school districts do. I'm not sure I would phrase the question that way, why are you staying in Edina Public Schools? But I think it's important to know what people value. I think what my biggest takeaway from the last year of board meetings is the narratives. I often ask the question, how do we know that? It's not what do we know, because people are saying they know stuff, but how do we know it? Because sometimes there are narratives that just don't match with what I've heard. And so that would be a question I'd be curious to ask, is how do we know that? I'd like to focus on retaining the people that are in there. I'll be honest, I'm a marketer. The best thing you could have marketing is 6,400 students that were having a bang-up time in school. That would really do loads for your marketing.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So we're going to move on to some questions, just a few questions that have something to do with property values. The first one is tax increment financing. It takes away from the Edina Public Schools revenues. Why no school board statements against this? Nicole?
I'm not sure. I'm not a part of the school board, so I don't know why they wouldn't have that. It's a good question.
My concern with TIF is that it is so arcane and so complex, it is virtually ungovernable, that the average citizen doesn't know what in the world is. Just out of show of hands, how many of you have heard of TIF before? Okay, good. How many of you feel you understand it? Not many hands, a lot fewer hands came up because of that. That's my point, that your citizens, this is your government, and if you don't understand it, and this has a huge impact on our city finances, our school district finances, it's too complicated. The second thing is it's not being used as it was designed. It's designed for recovering blighted zones. And Edina has, I don't know what it is, 8 active TIF districts going on right now. And I think the Perkins is up for another for TIF. And this is not being used the way it was intended. So it's not transparent governance. That's my biggest problem with it.
Thank you. Okay, if 22 to 26% educate their children elsewhere and the trend becomes larger each year, how does this drive a family's choice to pay more to live in Edina? Owen?
Well, this is one of the central questions, because why will people decide to move to Edina if the school district doesn't attract them the way it did? And there's speculation about this, that folks are so wealthy in Edina that they can afford other schools, but that's not the case for a lot of people. And so you're going to have fewer and fewer people being attracted to the district. So it certainly has to have an effect on lowering our attractiveness. The other thing, I mentioned this earlier, this is a threat to public education. Because if we can't retain and attract our own students within, this used to be the destination district in the state. I'm the only board member who was a native Minnesotan. And Edina had a mistake to it. And that's eroding. And there's always somebody to look up to try to beat. And Edina kind of was that. And so you're going to see more and more pressure for vouchers, more and more pressure for tuition credits. So it's a consequence of this, and that's very likely going to be happening.
Thank you, Nicole.
I don't know why people would continue to migrate here, other than the location, to use Mayor Hovland's, the location and the businesses. But when that third leg wobbles, at some point, you don't want to stand on it. So.
Okay, and the next question, with non-resident enrollment growing each year, how long will Edina taxpayers want to support the schools teaching children from outside our community? Nicole.
So I don't know, because I haven't asked all of the Edina taxpayers, but what I do know is that I have worked in nonprofit world for 15 plus years, and I am about inclusivity, and I want every child who wants to learn to be able to have an opportunity to learn. To me, the big part isn't that there's so many kids open and enrolled, it's that our resident kids are no longer choosing to be here, and that concerns me, because I wonder how long will this community continue to support public education when it's not good enough for its own kids if we have to send them elsewhere.
Mm-hmm. Owen?
Well, I've already answered this partially. And so I'm going to go in a different vein, and that is within the past week, a lengthy editorial was published in the Wall Street Journal by a constitutional law scholar questioning whether compulsory public education is constitutional. And there is increasingly more and more discussion about what this public education thing's about. And, it was designed to reinforce citizenship and democracy, going back to Horace Mann, if you've heard of him before. And it was reinforced by John Dewey, probably the founding father of modern public education. And so this is really going to be creating a set of questions about why we have this public schooling to begin with in the first place. So it's a serious issue that we have our enrollment eroding as we have.
Thank you. Now we're going to move on to some questions about the teachers union. I believe it's called Educate Minnesota Edina. So 4 candidates are endorsed by Educate Minnesota. Neither of you are. And the first question is why? Owen, you want to start?
Sure. Well, I think I answered it before in that I don't want to compromise my independence. I don't want to be accountable to the union. I want to be accountable to you and to my conscience. That's what I want to be accountable to.
Thank you.
So,
no, go ahead if you have more.
I've got a little bit more too, and I mean it's a troublesome issue for me, and one of the most derogatory things you can say about public education is calling it government schools. And so when you've got this going on, and you got the union endorsing, I'm the only non-union endorsed candidate. I think I said that out of 6 or 7. It sounds like EME government schools. Is this Edina schools, or is it Edina public schools, or is this EME government schools? Is your voice really being heard when 6 of your board members are endorsed by the union? And then you have a 30% turnout rate for elections that favor union candidates? No, I don't think it's a good thing.
Thank you. Nicole?
Well, he got applause, so I'd just like to hit repeat on his.
Yeah.
So, in all honesty, politics is not my gig. I'm in this because I love children and because I love learning and I love education, and I don't want anything to come between me and that.
Thank you. Okay, so should the union be involved in the school board election? In other public spaces, board members excuse themselves from negotiating, voting on, or approving contracts from those they have personal campaign relationships with. Why does our board not take that step? Nicole?
I like these questions that why does our board, I don't know the psyche of the board. I'm not sure why they're not taking those steps. I think you've heard Owen and I say that we're for it.
Yeah.
And there's a question over here.
Okay.
I just had a quick follow-up on that, because I think the last question was really interesting. You said you wouldn't accept the nomination, or the endorsement, excuse me, of the union, which is understandable, and I think you have the reason for it. But you didn't answer why they didn't endorse you. Because they could still endorse you, you can say, I don't accept it.
Oh, can I answer that?
I'm just wondering, what is the misalignment between you and the union?
Oh, I can, there,
Why don't we finish this question, ask the next one, and then it's open for public questions.
I apologize.
So let's just do it that way.
Thank you.
Margaret, what's he answering?
Okay, so we are on to, are you, we
I
ended?
answered.
You've already done it and Owen's already done it on that question, right? So we're moving on. Okay, how would the board negotiate union contracts if all are endorsed and received campaign support from the union? So it's really just a follow-up, I think, on what we were just saying. Do you have any other final thoughts on union?
well, it creates a conflict of interest. It's, at the very least, by appearances, it's not a good thing.
Yeah. Nicole, do you have any other thoughts? Okay.
It's pretty simple.
Okay, so that wraps up our questions that we have, and we would like to open up the microphones to additional questions. I think we can probably just move on to this first one, and I want anyone else to feel comfortable coming up after we get through this one.
Margaret, could I take it?
Yeah.
There's, I've been tracking social media on this, and there's a lot of misunderstanding about how that union endorsement takes place. The first thing is EME sends out an email to all candidates asking if they would like to be a part of the endorsement process. And it's not exactly, if you don't know what it is, you don't know exactly that this is the union interviewing you. I've declined it both times. And so you have to seek it.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I just wanted to know that.
And I sought it because I thought I was supposed to fill out, I'm a mom, and when we get an email with an attachment, we fill it out and we send it back. That's just what you do. And so I sent it back, and then I was like, wait a second, what is this the union thing that I've been hearing stuff about? Because I don't want to be any part of that, because I've seen the crazy people in the, federally, and like what's been going on. And so then I asked the question, because that's what I'm doing, and I said, if there's more than 4 of us that you would like to endorse, would you endorse us? Because where I come from in the nonprofit world, if there's someone that's a good candidate, you would endorse them or not endorse them. You wouldn't just endorse a slate. And so that, to me, is why I did not seek the endorsement, is because I didn't want to be a part of a slate. I feel like it has created some conflict, particularly over the last couple of years in Edina.
Yeah. Thank you. Does anyone else want to go up and take a podium?
I just have something to say. Do I have to go up there?
They might hear you better, that's all. Yeah.
To the microphone. Well, I don't have kids in school. I'm a bit, 25 and 28. But parenting never stops, just letting you know. But I did want to say that considering, the reality of 6 board members being endorsed by a union, I'm really glad that hopefully we can have some balance, if you all get elected, which I think is very much needed. Thank you.
I have a follow-on to that, if I may, which is I think that we're raising awareness about the union's effect in the district, and it may not play out in this election, but I think in subsequent elections, people are going to become more aware of it. So the very fact we're raising it is a good thing.
Yeah. How do you think people are going to get more aware of it? Like, what's the
very fact
mechanism?
we're talking about it right here.
Okay.
I've never heard it discussed like this before, anywhere close to this level of visibility.
Yeah. That's great.
Progress.
Yeah. I I have, oh, good, we have another one.
David Bice. I just have a rhetorical question. Where are the 4 union endorsed candidates? Why are they not here?
Look like we have another.
Do you need my name? Or can I just, okay, I can just ask a question. So I guess it's more of a logistical question, would be on this, the union endorsement of the board. My question is like, how is that even, not legal isn't the right word, but that could even be a policy that you could negotiate a contract with somebody, with the teachers, and then the board member take an endorsement or say from this group, well, we want you on the board. Is there any type of governing over that? I guess is my question. I guess so, Mr. Michaelson.
My understanding is that there isn't. There would have to be a state statute that would have to prohibit
state
that.
level. Okay. Okay.
So it's virtually a pack, and so
Right.
they're choosing who they would like, and but I think there is a conflict of interest, and I think there is something that we have grounds for having some kind of law prohibiting that.
Right. Well, it just, I was surprised that it didn't come through. You know, it seems like one of those campaign finance issues. I guess then the follow-up on that is when candidate, I don't remember who, but I guess I'll ask you because you're on the board. Do union representatives and board members ever communicate outside of a board meeting with each other? Do they socialize? Do they?
That's a $64,000 question. I don't know. I've wondered, but they're free to.
Okay.
And they're free to. And one of the things I don't like is the open meeting law. I don't know how many of you know this or not, but we are prohibited from talking about anything before the board with more than 2 people. Because then that third person, including yourself then, would be 4 people, which becomes de facto a quorum. And so then that is seen as a meeting of the board. And so we have to be very careful with whom we talk and about specific issues. And it was created because back in the 50s, I guess, board members would go to somebody's kitchen and they'd cook the whole business the night before, and their deliberation would be over somebody's kitchen table. And so there's great abuse in some areas. That's why the law came about. But it's so far overused right now.
Okay.
We can't have natural interactions with each other, but all the members of the board can talk with administration, can talk with the union, and now there's some, then they have some prohibition against that because there's some sort of triangulation, but that's less clear.
Is that something even as an informal policy that the Edina School Board could adopt? Would you be like supporting that, saying as a board we agree that we are not going to, going forward, take union endorsements or have outside conversations with unions about school
It's not
policy?
binding on candidates.
Okay.
So Nicole would have no, or the other candidates, that doesn't bind. That had to be a state statute.
It would okay, so even like as a board, you guys couldn't even just
We
say
can't
like,
make
we're going to
that
make
call.
that commitment to the community to say going forward we're not, even though it's not a law, we're not going to.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, that's all. I don't need anybody else to let me elaborate. Okay.
I just have one other quick question. Because Nicole, you had a lot of great data points your flyer I was looking through, and there's been a lot of conversation about test scores are down, this is down, enrollment's down. When it comes to test scores, I'm always curious because the enrollment of each class through the years, they're not the same kids. They're different kids. And we all know, well, you know, and I think most people know, there's more 504s, there's more IEPs, there's more English as second language students. Is it fair to say that we hold the students in this class, that's a very different group of kids, to the same standards that we did 5 years, 10 years ago? I grew up in Minnetonka, so I knew what Edina was, number one, 20 years ago. Is that fair? Because these are different kids that have different potentials and different expectations.
Well, that's why when I ask for MAP scores to be published, I say I want it aggregated by 3 dimensions: the school, the grade, and the cohort. Because you're exactly right. Because class to class to class can change. Yeah, graduating class. And so the class of 30, whatever would that be? Somewhere in like 5th grade or something. They may have very different dynamics from the class above or below them. And so you want to be able to track them as they make their progress through their 13 years.
Yes,
And
their
then-
success to the program.
But then from a statistical standpoint, there's also SLED's data, which the state aggregates, and so I didn't put that on there because it's just more and more data, but you can go to the Minnesota Department of Education website and you can see those variances, and that gives you that statistical confidence in what you're seeing. So I went to there, saw the SLED variance, saw that the variance is approximately equal across the classes, and so that gave me confidence in putting those two kind of comparative analysis. So absolutely, I do have a certificate in data analytics, and so I do look at that. It's really a hard story to tell. I mean, it really is, because there's so many dimensions, but let's remember it's not causation and correlation are not the same thing. But I think we do have to start looking at the data in a different way.
Thank you. Do we have one more question here?
Hi, I'm Pat Tyner, and I have maybe a difficult or different situation than maybe a lot of people. I have a son with disabilities, and he was in special ed from 18 months of age in the Edina schools until he was 16 in the special ed department. Dr. Marcia Karthus, I think some of you remembered her from a number of years ago. And I was involved with his education. I had been a teacher before. And they always said, watch out for this class that's moving through the system. Wait till you get them in 8th grade, you know. So I know there's that part of it. But there's also people with disabilities and other learning problems that might need special instructions and so forth. And when he was 16, he could barely print his first name after all those years of school here. I found a program by Fluke that I thought would work for him, and it deals with people with dyslexia, an old Dr. Orton Gillingham method. So I'm thinking of basically saying the methodology is what can be helpful to all these students. So I decided to homeschool him, and I used a method through a Seton homeschool study that had a special ed department. So we could read Tale of Two Cities, and I could understand it because it was at his reading level. So I could understand it too. So we did all of this, and he went through that program using this methodology. He went through reading. The first book he read was Lion, Witch, and Wardrobe. He's read Tale of Two Cities, Moby Dick, All Quiet on the Western Front. All of these things were part of that program at an adapted level. And I think it's the methodologies. I think we are in a scientific age. We need to see what works, how we can develop these kids. He went through geometry. I didn't make it that far. I made it through algebra, and I said, he's on his own for geometry. I'm not going there, because it was tough for me for algebra. But I was at another meeting with some schools and it was a private school nearby here, and they were talking about reading methodologies and actually increasing the brain matter of the student with scientific results and PET scans. And I can't remember the name of it. I have the information at home. Mm-hmm. And I think that, who wouldn't want to increase the child's brain matter? But it's the methodology of the actual, what works. And then trying this and trying that and trying the other thing, and then you're back to square one, and you're not seeing much progress. Well, this program that I taught had progress. These kids were all minorities. They had not much parental growing up and all this kind of stuff in Arizona. None of them were non-readers, and most of them were well beyond the normal average. So I guess that's my point, since I have a special needs child, and how all children could benefit by the methodologies that he learned, and how important it is to actually look into that and use that in the schools for our kids.
Thank you. So I think we're coming to the end of our time here, but you are welcome to talk individually to the candidates if you'd like. And I just want to thank both Nicole and Owen for coming out tonight. And I want to thank the people who came here and attended in person, and also the people online, and the other Edina Parents for Progress people who made this happen. So thank you.
months.